Sprinkle, sprinkle. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I have gotten a ton of requests lately to talk about my thoughts on SheraSeven, or if you don't know who I'm talking about, you've probably heard about the Sprinkle Sprinkle lady. And to be honest, I have not followed her, but I have seen some of her content online, and I decided to check out a little bit more of her content and to look into her a little bit more. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on her in this video, but I also want to kind of talk about the online dating guru world and sort of how I think it evolved into what it did, and also like how I think someone like a SheraSeven and similar accounts like hers have become so popular and why they've become so popular in our modern dating world. So before I dive into this, I want to make a little note about something, and I'm not going to get into this concept a little bit too much, but this is going to be a thread that really carries through the entire video, so I just want you to have this in your mind. And if you'd like me to talk about this a little bit more in a future video, but I don't want to take up the whole video talking about this, biologically speaking, women have to be more adaptable in society. We have to adapt to our environment because women are more vulnerable in society. We tend to not be as physically strong to defend ourselves. We have the risk of bearing children. There's a lot more risks in society being a woman than there is to being a man, which is the reason why biologically men are supposed to be the protectors and providers, whereas women are the ones who are meant to be protected and provided for. So the reality is women respond to how men show up. A lot of people want to argue it's the other way around, but biologically speaking, that really doesn't make sense. Men are seen and even claim to want to be the leaders of a society. So if men are going to be the leaders, then they are the ones that build the society and are supposed to be building it to protect and provide for women, and women respond to men's leadership. That's the way it works. I realize that in our current society, we've gotten away from that. There are more women who are leaders than ever, and I've talked about female leadership in other videos. I'm not going to dive into that here. But for the gist of this video, I want you to keep in the back of your mind that from an evolutionary perspective, women respond to how men show up. Women seek safety. We don't always do it in the smartest way. We don't always choose wisely when seeking safety, and I'm actually going to do another video talking about that in more depth. However, women respond to how men show up. The safer a woman feels in her environment, the more relaxed, soft, and open she's going to be. But the less safe a woman feels in her environment, the more closed off she's going to be, and the more she's going to have to enact her masculine shield to protect herself. So when I see men in society complaining about women being too masculine or being too guarded or being, you know, broken or being damaged or something, women are responding to how men show up. So if you don't like how women are showing up in a society, you have to look to the men. I realize that topic could be a whole video in itself, but I want you to understand that because that's going to be a really important thread. It's going to run throughout this entire video. I'm at an age, I'm in my 40s, and I think once you get to be, you know, my age, you start to see things going in cycles. You start to see trends that, you know, are very cyclical. The situation we're in now in the dating scene actually reminds me a lot of the way things were years ago. I would say maybe about 15 to 20 years ago or so. There was a book that came out that took over the dating world because it was a dating book designed for men, which the self-help industry, especially when it comes to dating and things like that, really was more geared towards women, teaching women how to find a man. So the game coming out and being a book designed for men, it just kind of took the world by storm. At least here in the United States. I don't know how popular it was in other places. The game was written by Neil Strauss, who was, I believe, a journalist with Rolling Stone who had infiltrated the world of pickup artists and was learning their techniques and really like immersed himself in that world. And he wrote this book that was kind of designed to, I mean, it was really designed as a book about the world of pickup artists, but kind of threaded throughout the book were supposedly tips for men on how to become a master pickup artist. It actually even became a VH1 show where they actually made like this sort of reality competition that was kind of like a makeover show for men, where they took kind of like, you know, geeky, awkward guys and like made them over into these master pickup artists type of thing. So when this book first got popular, I was working as a stand-up comedian in Boston. So I was mostly surrounded by men, a lot of them very socially awkward. And I actually had a veteran comic who's kind of a mentor of mine, kind of like give me a heads up that like pretty much every comedian in Boston, probably not just Boston, probably in other places too, had read this book called The Game. And so I was like, interesting. So all of the guys that I work with on a regular basis, who pretty much don't come in contact with many women other than me, are reading this book on how to become a master pickup artist. I should really check this out and find out what's going on here. So I actually bought the book, I read the book. It was actually a fascinating read, and I will say it was very well written. Like, I couldn't put it down. I was really fascinated by it. Like, from a psychological perspective, for sure, it is an amazing read. And the book itself angered a lot of women because it was very focused on manipulating women. So you can understand why it would upset a lot of women. But honestly, when I finished reading the book, I had this real wave of sadness and depression, because I think it opened my eyes to just how manipulative the dating scene really was. I think I still, you know, even though I had dated and I had been dating for a while at this point, I think I was still sort of like wide-eyed and optimistic about the dating world. And this book really kind of was just like a big wake-up call. I just felt so much sadness that I was just like, oh my God, there are men out there who are actually just treating women like they're just collecting phone numbers and they don't actually care. Because I was somebody who, you know, always from the minute that I started, you know, actually dating, I wanted to find love. I wanted to find a connection. I think I was a hopeless romantic in that sense, emphasis on the hopeless. The fact that here was this book that was exposing men who were really just going out and just seeing how many phone numbers they could collect. Like, they were really dehumanizing women and just seeing them as a conquest and not as humans. Now, I always knew that men were driven by challenge, and I'd always heard the idea of like, you should make a man work for you and things like that. Like, I'd heard that advice before, but I don't know if I ever really took it that seriously. But then actually reading The Game, it just made me really feel like men were being trained to just see women as like not even human. In fact, some of the terms from this book, like the neg, if any of you are familiar with the term the neg, which is really kind of like a backhanded compliment that a man would give a woman, and it's designed to like mess with her self-esteem so that she doesn't think she's like, you know, as great a catch as she actually is, so she's more likely to give a guy a chance because he's like messed with her self-esteem. Like that kind of manipulation, right? Like that's where that term came from. Now, around this same time, there was another book that started to get a lot of popularity, and that book was called The Rules, and it was marketed to women. I actually don't know when the book The Rules kind of initially came out. It's kind of something that's always felt like, or at least the way they wrote it was like something that your grandmother would have taught you, regardless of how far back your grandmother's generation goes. Like, it kind of feels like it's a book that's always existed, but I don't actually know when it was originally published. But it has come out in many different versions. They've updated it over the years. I feel like every few years it kind of regains popularity. But it really got to a lot of popularity around the same time as The Game. And for those of you that aren't familiar with The Rules, I mean, to be honest, I read like every dating book around at that point. I actually still have a bunch of them. I have like a whole stack of like dating advice books. In fact, if you want me to do any reviews of dating advice books and stuff, let me know. Leave a comment and let me know if that's something you want to see, and maybe any requests of books that you'd like me to review. Some of them I probably have to reread to give a good review, but you know, I have a whole bunch of them. So, but if you want me to do a review of any like popular dating advice books or anything, let me know. But yeah, The Rules it's a very long book. At least the version that was coming out like back like 15-20 years ago. It's a very long book with a lot of rules in it. It was marketed to women, kind of like how to find yourself a husband. So I read that book, and I will admit it's overwhelming because again, there's so many rules. It's so complicated about like so many days for this and so many days for that, and like don't talk for this long, or don't do this, or do this and don't do that. And it can get really overwhelming and overcomplicated. And the thing is that the book The Rules became like a laughing stock. Like, it became this big joke. You'd see jokes about it all over sitcoms and things like that. It was just this outdated idea, like, you know, this old-fashioned archaic idea of dating rules for women and things like that. I find it interesting that these shows weren't making fun of The Game, which was actually a book about manipulation, but they were making fun of the rules, saying that the rules were actually women learning how to manipulate men. But like, people weren't criticizing The Game, which was literally marketed as a book to teach men how to manipulate women. I really do believe that the people that were making fun of the rules had not actually read the book. Now, I don't love the book 100%, but I do think that it can be a good starting point. I think if you are a woman, particularly if you're in very like wounded feminine energy where you just fall for people too fast, too quick, you're feeling like you're in a lot of like needy energy. Like, I have a video talking about pick me girls, and if you're feeling like you're very needy for a relationship, you are falling for guys like too fast, too quick, things like that, I do think the rules can give you a more practical way of training yourself to not rush too fast into relationships. Like, it can kind of train you to pace yourself. And there's really nothing in the rules that is actually offensive to men. It's not about using men, and I think if you actually like read the book, in reality, the basis of the rules, like what it really was teaching women. In fact, rule number 1 is you are a creature unlike any other. So it's really about women feeling confidence within themselves and not rushing too fast into a relationship, not getting emotionally attached to somebody too quickly in a relationship, and pacing the relationship so that you don't rush into something too quickly, and to not be too available to men and to make men show that they're actually interested in you by putting in effort. Now, the way they go about it, I think is just, it's too much in your head. If you as a woman are just like thinking too much about all these rules and like counting the, okay, when do I respond? Do I respond to him in 2 days or 3 days? Or, okay, if he calls me this day, then I have to pretend I'm not here because I have to pretend I'm doing something. Like, it feels very inauthentic. In that way, it can feel a little manipulative. However, the basic premise of the rules is simply that you as a woman carry yourself with enough confidence, you're living your life, you're enjoying your life. When you do meet a man, you don't drop everything and make him your whole life, which as women, we have a tendency to do. Maybe not every woman, but a lot of women do. And we simply don't drop everything and mold our life around a new man that we've just met. It trains women to say, okay, I've met this man, I'm gonna live my life and I'm gonna get to know this man and I'm gonna take things slow, I'm gonna pace the relationship, and I'm going to see if this man is willing to show up in a relationship and to pursue me in a way that shows that he is actually a quality man. That's really what all the rules are summed up into. And you don't need like a whole book with all kinds of rules to figure that out. Now, if you are someone who's a woman who's feeling very wounded, who gets into that needy mentality, and you need some real structure because you haven't really like sunk into that, like I'm feeling good about myself and, you know, I'm living my life, and you haven't gotten there yet, the rules can be a good starting point. It can be a good place for structure. I do think that something like the rules can be a nice buffer for you if you need some structure in order to get you to that place where you're just doing things intuitively. So I don't actually think the rules are necessarily wrong, and in reality, the rules are not actually anti-man or manipulative towards men. They actually benefit men a lot. There's a whole chapter in there about that. But like, the reality is it does benefit men, because what do men always say that they don't want? They don't want a woman who's used up. They don't want a woman who's promiscuous, who's just jumping in bed with every man. They don't want a woman who is been run through or whatever. Well, in order for a woman to not be run through or used, or I hate those terms, I really do. I'm using those because those are the ones that like the manosphere is using. Then a woman has to hold herself in a high enough regard so she's not jumping in bed with every man. She's got to learn how to pace a relationship so she's not rushing into things too quickly and getting emotionally attached. And the only way a woman's going to do that is if she learns how to set these sort of like quote unquote rules for pacing a relationship and letting a man show her that he's willing to show up and be a quality man. So we get into the hypocrisy of the manosphere, but I'm going to get into that in a minute. Now, I remember in this time, like seeing this kind of mix and reading about the rules, and I was kind of trying to incorporate them into my own life and figure out, you know, because I was still figuring out dating at that point in my life. Then, you know, I have The Game, and I actually saw a lot of guys that I was working with, who were very socially awkward and they had read the game. And I'm not gonna lie, I did actually see some improvements in some of these guys in their confidence level. But I think they were typically the guys who kind of like already had a certain level of confidence and ability to talk to women. And I remember having a conversation actually specifically with a guy I was working with who really wasn't a hugely socially awkward guy. He wasn't necessarily like a, you know, a ladies' man or anything, but he wasn't like incredibly socially awkward. And I remember like the subject of the book, The Game, came up and he was just like, oh, hey, some line, I forget what the line was, some line from the book, which is like a pickup line from the book. He's like, that works every time. Like, I get in a conversation with a woman every time I use that line. And I was like, you know, that's not really a pickup line. Like, that's actually an icebreaker. Like, all you guys needed was an icebreaker to get the conversation started. You didn't need a whole book about how to manipulate women. You just needed some self-confidence and some basic communication skills, like a nice icebreaker to start a conversation. It's not that I didn't see any positive changes in some of the men that I was working with something like The Game, but there was also so much manipulation. And I think also when you're giving men who already have like an awkwardness, or they may already have some like issues dealing with women, or maybe some heartbreak from women that they haven't worked through and healed, and then you give them this book on how to manipulate women, that's kind of a villain origin story right there. Like, you're literally like creating little villains that are just like, oh, they already have issues towards women that they haven't worked out, and you're just kind of giving them an arsenal of how to treat women badly and take advantage of them. So while I'm not saying that The Game was 100% a bad book, or, you know, was only bad lessons, like I do think that there were positive aspects to it, overall it was pretty destructive to men and their views of women and how they interacted with women, because it was very manipulative. And the same thing with The Rules. I think there was a lot of benefits to it. I think at the root there was some possible benefits that women could get from it. It really was a book of rules that was keeping women like in their heads and not letting women actually listen to their bodies and their intuition. So it was really disconnecting women from their feminine energy in reality. The Game was putting men in a very like wounded masculine, because it was making men very manipulative and not actually humanizing women. And of course, neither of these books was actually getting to the root of people's emotional issues and actually focusing on like doing the inner work, which is not something that we focus on enough in like the dating advice world, but that's a whole other conversation. The thing that I never really heard people talk about was the fact that I don't believe it's a coincidence that a book like The Game would get popular at the same time that a book like The Rules was getting popular. Because in reality, again, like I said, women respond to how men show up, and women are going to seek safety. If a woman was playing by the rules, she would be protected from a man who was playing the game. That's really what it was. At the root of it, I don't believe it's a coincidence at all that The Rules got so popular after the book The Game came out, because it literally was a way that women could protect themselves from men who were playing the game. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually saw this in action, and I also felt like reading The Game gave me like this sort of like secret code. Like, I started to know when guys were actually using those things on me, like when they were giving me a neg, or when they were actually using manipulation on me to get me to do something. Like, I started noticing that and picking up on that. And I noticed that when I actually started following the rules, those guys would just disappear, like, because I wasn't so easily manipulated. It was a protection. Now, of course, I wasn't getting a lot of dates at that point in time, but I also wasn't ending up in situations where I was getting used and manipulated, because I had an arsenal of tools to protect myself. Now, the fact that I wasn't meeting a lot of people who were actually like emotionally healthy people who were also actually looking for a healthy relationship is a whole other issue. But like, that's really kind of the way the dating world was at that point in time. And as much as I don't know this for certain, but I'm willing to bet, based on the like age range that like the Tate brothers are in, and also a lot of the other manosphere guys, like kind of the original RedPill manosphere guys, are all in an age range where I would be willing to bet, and I don't know this 100%, but I'd be willing to bet that most of them read The Game or studied The Game, maybe even with the people that the book was about, like these master pickup artists. Because most of the current manosphere RedPill community podcast bros are using the tools from The Game, or from that pickup artist mindset, and that's what they're teaching men. So it's literally like The Game has resurged in a different form. It's not in this book now or like in a VH1 show. It's in the podcasts and it's in these like online manosphere courses and things like that. And then of course I think that the, you know, sort of the elder statesmen of the manosphere have sort of mentored the younger guys so that it spreads. And of course this kind of stuff is going to spread even more because when the game came out originally, I think MySpace was a thing at that point in time. Now that I think about it, like it's not that social media didn't exist, but it was in its infancy. So like social media was not the world that it is now. So like the popularity and the lessons in that book were not going to spread wildly because like podcasts and stuff like just weren't a thing back then. Whereas now that kind of message, that sort of very manipulative pickup artist message can spread like wildfire because of the internet and social media. This whole, the manosphere world, the high value man stuff, like all that stuff that you see, it's really just like a regurgitation of the game and the lessons from the pickup artists of the past. And to be honest, I'm sure that the game and like that pickup artist role was not the beginning of it. That's the first time I became familiar with it, but you know, I'm sure that there were probably people before and then maybe people older than me that are like, oh yeah, there was, I don't know, something else even before that. But that really is what it is. Like the manosphere, the red pill space, the podcast bro space is really just a regurgitation of the game and that world of master pickup artists. It's very manipulative. It's not really training these guys to be part of a good, healthy relationship, which is why I always find it so funny when I give advice and people are like, where's your ring? I'm like, well, okay, but you guys are listening to these manosphere guys and where's their ring? They market to men in, okay, I can teach you how to get a whole lot of women. And to be honest, a lot of this manipulation is the same thing that happens in basic marketing, basic advertising, and selling you stuff. They use mind manipulation in order to convince you that you need their product. I mean, that's basic marketing, right? So now that we have this world now, you have this world of these men who are basically trying to coach other men, even younger men now, to manipulate women, to use women, to, I know they're saying that they're protecting themselves from women, but what you really have is you have a whole lot of like unhealed men that have a lot of issues towards women. They're not dealing with their own pain and trauma towards women or even towards, you know, their mothers or their fathers or, you know, their own issues, and they're basically trauma dumping their stuff onto the younger generation. It's all coming from a very manipulative place that really comes from their own trauma. I mean, I know I've said this in other videos, but so many times when I watch these, like the manosphere guys or the podcast bros, there is a part of me that is like, oh my God, they're just wounded little boys. They're wounded little boys that are just being really loud and having temper tantrums and trying to hurt women, manipulate women, use women. They're dehumanizing women. But I really do believe, some of them I do believe are sociopaths or narcissists. But some of them, I think they're just wounded, broken little boys who just have not dealt with their own issues and are just projecting that on other people, which I think is really dangerous. And I have a video about male leadership and things like that I talk about this a little bit more, that I think the lack of healthy masculine leadership in our society has really opened up a space for like these very broken or very manipulative guys to like step into this leadership space and are just doing more harm than good. However, because of this happening, which is kind of like, again, a regurgitation of the game, you're gonna have women who are gonna feel like they need to protect themselves. Women respond to how men show up. So if men are showing up as these very manipulative, the high value men who are like, I'm gonna use women, I'm gonna get whatever I can from women, I'm gonna play women, I'm gonna learn how to play the game that they think women are playing, they're accusing women of hypergamy, and they're thinking I'm gonna use her before she uses me and everything. Women are gonna respond to that. Women are gonna have to do something to protect themselves from that. Enter SheraSeven. Now, she's not the only person that's doing this, okay? She's the sprinkle lady, if you're not familiar. Her clips and stuff are all over TikTok. That's how I first heard about her. I believe she has a YouTube channel, and then she has like a Patreon subscription channel. I don't think she's actually on TikTok, but there are a lot of accounts that share her stuff on TikTok, and I don't know if she runs them or not, or I don't really know what the deal with that is, but she's pretty easy to find her stuff. She's not the only person, but I think she's the most popular of them. I gotta be honest, SheraSeven from a marketing perspective is kind of brilliant. I gotta be honest, like her sprinkle catchphrase, like her personality, her delivery, she's very enticing. She does a great job of drawing people in, and you know, selling her message with humor. She's got a very distinct personality. She's a very distinct perspective. And I do believe, and I know there's probably a lot of people that are gonna question this, she's using a lot of the same marketing techniques that somebody like Andrew Tate is. She really is. I will give credit where credit is due. The persona, the marketing, the image that like draws people in, like from that perspective, is brilliant. And I would say that for both of them. Now, I don't think that SheraSeven is probably a sex trafficker, but from a marketing perspective, they're both brilliant. However, you really can't be a brilliant marketer without having a certain level of manipulation and deception. It's just part of the game, literally part of the game. SheraSeven's popularity in giving dating advice, and she even says she's not like a dating coach or a dating expert, she's a financial advisor. She is really coaching women to be gold diggers. I don't love that term, but I do think in her situation it is somewhat appropriate. I don't believe that all women who are looking for a man who's a provider, looking for a man with resources, and looking for a man with, you know, with money or material possessions or things like that, I don't believe that these women are all gold diggers. There's actually another sort of dating guru, Patty Stranger. She's the Millionaire Matchmaker. She actually sums this up in her book actually really well as like a woman who is just looking for a provider husband is not necessarily a gold digger. A gold digger is a woman who is just looking for the money, she's just looking for the possessions, she's just looking for the material things, and she will trade in that man for somebody with more resources. She's essentially the definition of hypergamy, right? She is a woman who just does not care about the actual individual and that person. She's just looking to trade up, and she will constantly trade up to get more and more and more and more and more. And that is like her definition of a gold digger. Whereas it's different than a woman who just wants to fall in love and have a great relationship with a man who has money and resources and can be a provider. Those are two different things. Now, there's probably a lot of ways that we could debate that issue, but that's kind of the perspective that I come from. So somebody like SheraSeven is not actually coaching women, and she admits this. She's not actually coaching women to have a healthy, compatible relationship. She's coaching women to essentially be hypergamous and just, you know, find a guy with the most money and the most resources in any situation. It's really not about finding love. It's not about finding a connection or a healthy relationship. It's just about getting that bag. It's just about getting the money or getting the man with money. Again, I feel like someone like SheraSeven, and I don't want to attack her personally because again, I don't know her personally. She talks about being married, and she talks about her husband James being a man with money, and I know she has mentioned that he was married when she met him and he ended up leaving his wife and choosing her. I find it interesting that she's still put up on a pedestal, but yet we're trying to cancel Ariana Grande for doing a similar thing. Again, I'm not trying to dig into that, but I find sometimes the hypocrisy of like who we criticize for their decisions and who we support for the same decisions to be interesting. I'm not trying to justify either situation. And I gotta tell ya, and I had to learn this the hard way, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not proud of this. If you date a man who's already in a relationship and make yourself the other woman, even if that man does leave that woman for you, like, there's a saying like how you find that man is probably how you're gonna leave him, or the reason why your relationship's gonna end. But again, when you're looking at kind of this mindset of like the hypergamy or something, it really is a response to the sort of high value man, alpha male manosphere world. In that world, you have men and just pearly things really, who are telling women that, okay, you can have a high value man, you can have a man that has money and success, but he's gonna cheat on you. You know, if you can't give him X, Y, and Z, or like, you know, the whole thing is just really disturbing. But someone like SheraSeven is going to come to popularity because at the end of the day, she's appealing to women who are like, oh, well, I'm gonna play the player. I'm not gonna let myself get hurt. I'm gonna find this high value man, and I know I can't trust him. I know he's not gonna be faithful. I'm gonna accept the fact that this man's gonna be a sleazeball, but I'm gonna take everything I can from him. Which is really kind of a defense mechanism, because it's like you're going into a relationship like, well, I know this man's gonna hurt me, but I'm just gonna take him for everything that I can get. You know, if you do have one of these like alpha males who's like, yeah, I'll provide for you, but I'm gonna be hooking up with a lot of other women because I got other options, and you got some woman who's like, I just want your money and I don't really care what you do. If you've got two people like that and that's actually what they really want and they really don't care about each other and they're really just both using each other, well, I'm not one to tell them not to do that. As long as you're all consenting adults in this situation, I'm not going to tell you what to do. However, most people are not going to be happy with that. Most people are not truly going to be satisfied in that situation. But the thing with someone like SheraSeven, which is actually, I believe, again, there's so many similarities to her and a lot of these, you know, the alpha males, in the sense that oftentimes when they talk, I mean, there's some of these alpha males who I think are just some of the most immoral, corrupt human beings on the planet. There are sometimes someone will show a clip of something they're saying and I'm just like, yeah, that's correct. Because one thing that I think you have to understand about manipulation, if you don't already understand about manipulation, is that if somebody who was trying to present themselves as like a guru or a cult leader or whatever, someone who wanted to manipulate you, if they just went out and just started saying stuff that didn't make any sense to anybody, they're just spewing a whole bunch of stuff that nobody was thinking and no one was saying and everything they said was incorrect, people would just be like, this person's a lunatic. Like, we don't respect anything that they say. Like, we don't believe anything. Like, you're crazy, right? They'd probably be in the loony bin. However, if you sprinkle in some truth and some real things, some reality, some things that people agree with, you lure them in. And then once they're lured in, then you throw at them the things that you really want them to think. You throw in the manipulation, you throw in the mind control stuff, because you've already lured them in. Now, a person who is, you know, confident within themselves, able to think for themselves, the person who kind of like has their life together is less likely to fall for that, because they're more likely to be like, oh, that doesn't align for me. I think I'm gonna back away now. However, because many of us in society have just grown up, I mean, we've been, you know, gaslit and manipulated by the media, by advertising for most of our lives. So when we see a lot of these gurus online that throw out, they sell you a whole bunch of stuff that you're like, yeah, no, I'm on board. Like, I really do. I like what you're saying. And then when they throw in that manipulation, you're just kind of like, okay, well, I agree with so many other things they're saying, then this thing might be true, right? And you're less likely to be able to think for yourself and say like, ooh, this doesn't align for me. So in the same way that when I watch some of these alpha males, there's definitely times they say things that I'm just like, yeah, no, they're correct. But I think oftentimes too many people latch on to those things and they're like, okay, so everything they say must be correct, when a lot of the things they say aren't actually correct. And I do think that someone like a SheraSeven, or, you know, there are other offshoots in the same way that I think Andrew Tate kind of became like this icon in the alpha male space, and then he's got all these offshoots. I think that there's women that are kind of like SheraSeven that are kind of offshoots that are gaining more popularity. And you hear someone like SheraSeven, I listened to quite a few of her videos and I was like, you know, she's got some points. She's got some good points. I don't disagree with everything that she says. I think she's got some of the stuff she says is actually a relatively good message. She's also got a lot of stuff in there that I really don't think is very healthy. And part of what she does, which is partly brilliant, but it's also part of the manipulation, is she's very humorous, and she does have this sort of like she's playing a character, like this caricature of herself, which is the same argument that people use about Andrew Tate. Oh, he was just playing a character. Whereas I feel like the people that are going to start defending SheraSeven, like if she gets attacked the same way that Andrew Tate gets attacked, I don't think it's going to be the same thing, because I don't think that SheraSeven's actually, as far as I can tell, I don't think she's participating in criminal behavior. But she is kind of training women to essentially sell their bodies for sex. I mean, it's not necessarily prostitution, but it's not exactly different. But I do see a lot of people being like, oh, well, she was just playing a character, or like she was, because she is kind of, she's got this persona about her. Now, most of us have social media personas, or we have aspects of our personality that we show online, and then there's parts of us that just aren't showing up online. Like, I'm not saying that that's not a thing, or that we all should just be, you know, sharing everything about ourselves or everything online. I mean, you know, part of our world is we show up online as our online persona, and then, you know, we're probably different with our friends, and we're probably different at our job, and we're probably different with our family, and different aspects of our personality come out at different times. That said, I know for me, I'm very sensitive to authenticity. I hold myself to a very high standard as far as authenticity goes, and so I hold other people to that standard. And in the same way that when I watch some of these alpha males, and I don't feel an authenticity with many of them, or most of them. I don't think there's any that I do feel an authenticity with. It feels very inauthentic. It feels like this is a facade and this is a show. And with someone like SheraSeven, I don't feel like there's an authenticity to her. And I'm not saying that to bash her, because, you know, I realize she's much more successful than I am when it comes to being online and social media. But I do believe that her popularity is really a response that women are naturally going to have when they feel unsafe, to feel like, okay, here are all these men who are, you know, with these podcasts and all these things that are training men to be players. Having a woman online who's like, hey, here's how you play the player before the player can play you, it's gonna be appealing to a lot of women. I don't think any of it's emotionally healthy on either side. But again, women respond to how men show up. So if you have men that are coaching other men on how to be manipulative and to take advantage of women, it's not that surprising that you would have women who are looking to other women to figure out, okay, well, how do I protect myself? And one of the ways that women are going to protect themselves is to learn how to play a man first before he can play her. But it's literally part of our psychology. It's biologically ingrained in us as women to protect ourselves in that way. So I have a video on here talking about pick-me girls and some pick-me influencers, which is actually why a lot of people requested that I talk about SheraSeven, because I know she speaks out against like the pick-me-shas. Again, in the same way that I think the rules is a good basis for if you are really stuck in that pick-me mentality, or you are finding yourself just falling too hard too fast, letting yourself be a doormat, letting yourself being taken advantage of, having rules or some of SheraSeven's kind of like advice, so to speak, can be a good structure for helping you get out of that mindset. But you have to be really careful. And like I mentioned in my video about pick-me influencers, I really want people to be very mindful about who they follow, whose advice they follow. I don't believe you should follow anybody's advice online blindly, includes my own. I don't think anybody should just blindly follow anybody. I think you really have to like tune in, especially as women. You need to tune into your body, tune into your intuition, and check in and be like, okay, how does this feel for me? Like, how is this, I really want women to learn to tune into their own intuition. Even if that means that you don't resonate with what I say, I would rather you tune into your intuition and make that decision yourself. I followed a lot of people blindly on social media before, and in some cases I've gotten scammed out of a lot of money. In some cases I got what I needed to over a period of time and then realized that maybe this person didn't align with me anymore or something like that. But I really want people to be mindful. And I think one of the problems with, I say the internet and online and social media, but in reality I feel like this has kind of been going on since the beginning of advertising in general. So this isn't really a new thing. But one of the issues that we have right now, I think, with some of these online gurus is that the people that make the most money, that have the most success, the people that have the most followers and get the most hype and attention are usually the people that are selling you something that is kind of like outrageous and probably somewhat toxic, or at least unhealthy in a certain way. And like from the men's perspective, there are a lot of these sort of like men's leaders and men's coaches that are basically marketing themselves as like teaching men how to be players and get as many women as possible and hook up with as many women as possible and, you know, like play women or manipulate women or, you know, take advantage of women or get back at the women who wouldn't go out with them when they were younger or something like that. Like it's coming from a really unhealthy place of like teaching men, like, I can teach you how to take advantage of women, which isn't really a healthy mindset to be in. Because a man showing up and being like, hey, I can show men how to find a nice healthy relationship isn't like sexy and attention getting, right? So it's the men who are selling this toxic idea that are like sensationalized, and it lures people in. And because men tend to, partly because of porn culture and partly just because of men's nature of like valuing quantity over quality, it lures men into like, yeah, I want to get a bunch of women. And those are the men that tend to make the most money. Or because I mean, I've known men's coaches who I think are actually pretty, you know, great individuals and had a great message, but they're not the big showy over the top guys because the message that they're selling is not sensationalized. And in the same way that someone like, say, a SheraSeven is going to get so popular and she's got the sprinkle stuff to market to women, like, you know, we can either find you a husband, or we can find you a rich man, or, you know, a rich husband, or something like that, like marketing that to women, this sort of sensationalized idea of like, I'm going to teach you how to get yourself a man and keep a man, and, or get you a wealthy man, or something like that kind of like sensationalized idea. It's going to lure in more women. It's the over-the-top sensationalized people that have the big marketing plan and that have this, like, they're literally manipulating their followers as well as actually teaching you how to manipulate people. They're the people that get the most attention. They make the most money online, so they have the most resources, so they can create more content, so that they get to be, you know, bigger stars and celebrities, and they get more attention, and more people are going to follow their advice. And of course, things just get more and more toxic, right? We're rewarding manipulative behavior, not just in relationships, but we're rewarding manipulative behavior. People who are using manipulation in marketing, which we've been doing in advertising for years, but same with politicians or, you know, social media influencers, is the people that are the most marketed or manipulating people the most with their marketing tend to be the people that get the most fame and success. Whereas if you have someone who's just like, hey, I can tell you how to get into a good, healthy relationship or something, like, they're not the people that people are going to follow. When in reality, those are probably the people that you want to listen to, because those are the people who are not manipulating you, and they're not the people who are going to teach you how to manipulate somebody. They're probably coming from a healthier, healed place. But again, with social media and the world that we're in, it's not the people who are coming from like a healed, good, healthy place that are the ones that get put up on a pedestal and end up making the most money and getting the most attention. That's just the way the world is. Well, I do know that there are men out there, like sort of manosphere, alpha male people who don't love the SheraSeven mentality, although in reality, her mentality of hypergamy and teaching women to be quote-unquote gold diggers actually fits in with what people in the manosphere already believe women to be anyway. You can't really get that upset about it if you think about it. I have seen a lot of female, like, dating gurus and stuff online get very upset with the things that SheraSeven says. And I'm not going to sit here and, you know, bash her or criticize her. I mean, I do think that what she's saying and doing is coming from a manipulative place. And I don't necessarily think that the way she is, I mean, the way she's delivering it is brilliant because she's luring people in. I don't necessarily think that her message is 100% healthy, but I'm not necessarily going to go off on her because, you know, I do think that there's some validity in the things that she says. My issue is you really have to kind of weed through some of her sort of toxic messages and the part that is just sort of like having a wall up and being like, I'm going to use him before he uses me. As a woman, you're never going to be satisfied in a relationship that way. But I'm also not going to get upset. I've seen some women online who are dating gurus who have gotten really upset with people like SheraSeven. And I can understand from a certain perspective because she does give some unhealthy advice. And also it is frustrating sometimes, I think, to see someone get so successful when you know their message is not necessarily as healthy. But I also think that, you know, I've seen some, you know, female coaches and gurus and things like that that have criticized SheraSeven for, you know, teaching women to be entitled. I gotta be honest, I know the word entitled gets a really bad rap, and I know that it can mean some negative things sometimes, but I gotta be honest, I think that women today need to be more entitled. I think women today need to show up and own their worth more. This idea that men have that women are so entitled is kind of ridiculous when you have so many women who are having babies with losers or staying in relationships with losers for years on end. If women actually were entitled and owned their worth, we wouldn't see the like rampant world of, you know, women having babies with broke men and things like that. Like, I actually think women need to be owning their worth more. However, the problem with like the SheraSeven mentality, and I'm focusing on that because that's what people wanted me to talk about, but there's other women who are similar to her who I think are making similar content, because you're always going to have offshoots because people are going to see how successful she is and then use that message to also try to jump on the sprinkle bandwagon. You're not going to find like a healthy, healed relationship with someone. And I by no means am telling you to go out and date a broke man or sleep with a broke man or become a pick-me-sha or find a build-a-bear man or something like that. Like, I'm not telling you to do that at all. I absolutely believe that women need to have high standards and they need to hold to those high standards. I think that's incredibly important. However, if you're going into relationships like, I'm gonna play him before he plays me, you're never gonna be able to let your guard down in a relationship. You're never gonna be able to actually open your heart. It's always gonna be a transactional relationship, and I know there's a lot of people that argue that relationships are always transactional, and to a certain extent that's true. However, the exchange of sex and money as being a transaction is not really the basis of a healthy relationship. The man should absolutely be the provider. I have videos talking about sacred sexuality and things like that, but I do think it's unhealthy to get into this mindset of like sex is a reward for men for what they're financially investing. I think men need to financially invest in women, and I think that men need to show that they can be a protector and provider, and they need to prove to women that they can be protectors and providers, because that's what we're asking men to be. They need to show up and prove that they can do that and prove that they are willing to do that. Men thrive in challenge, women thrive in safety. I say this all the time. You need to challenge men. Women need to be a challenge for men so that men actually show up and prove that they are worthy. That's the basis of our entire dating world, and the fact that women are not holding men to higher standards and that they are not actually being a challenge for men is actually the basis of the problems that we have in our dating society. And if men are too lazy to step up to the challenge, which a lot of them are today, and they're expecting princess treatment, just leave those men aside. Let them date other men. Don't even worry about them. But the reality is, men thrive in challenge, women thrive in safety. Men need to be providing safety for a woman. If you as a woman are going into a relationship like, I'm gonna play him before he plays me, you're never really gonna be able to feel safe in a relationship, because it's solely based on this money for sex transaction. And that's a dangerous place to be in. Providing for a woman is not for a woman to give a man sex. Sex in a relationship is meant to be something that two people do together for each other to cultivate love, connection, sexual energy in a relationship. So we need to stop thinking about sex in a relationship as being something that a woman does for a man. That's a whole other video and a whole other topic, but we gotta stop getting being in that mentality. A woman does not give a man sex as a reward for him providing. A man protects and provides because that's what he's supposed to do as a man. And then when they are in a committed relationship and they actually engage in sex with each other, it is something that they do together for each other. That should be a 100% full-bodied yes for both of them, and should be something that they do to cultivate love, connection, potentially new life or sexual energy or something, like in a relationship with each other. Sex is not for a man. Sex is not something you do for him as like a reward for something he does or a punishment or something. It's something that you choose to do in a relationship together, which is, again, a whole separate topic. But, you know, when you have sort of the SheraSeven message about like, oh, sex is something you give to a man because he's spending money on you or he's treating, no. That's not what it is. In the same way that in the manosphere, when they're like, oh no, well, if you're not going to give a man sex whenever he wants, then, you know, a man shouldn't have to provide for you. No, that's not how this works. That's not how the system works, okay? This idea of exchanging money for sex is just because in some instances, like we exchange money for a lot of things, not just sex. Are there situations where money is exchanged for sex? Yes, it's called prostitution. But that is not what a relationship is. Sex is something that two people show up in a relationship to do together, whereas protecting and providing is something that men do because that's their purpose. That's their reason for being here, is to protect and provide. Point blank, period. So the gist of this is, I don't think that any of these people online, any of the dating gurus, any of the relationship gurus, the alpha males, the SheraSevens and all of her offshoots and stuff, like, I don't think that they're all bad or all wrong, but there is a lot of bad messaging, manipulative behavior, and a lot of really like unhealthy messages and things that are going to appeal to people's traumas, and they're not meant to cultivate a healthy relationship. So I think that a lot of their messages can be damaging, even though they do have some good points. They also have a lot of bad points, and unfortunately it's up to us to kind of weed through what is good messaging and what is bad messaging. And I really would like to encourage anyone watching, and this goes for men or women, to really learn to like tune into some of these people and some of their messaging and some of the things that they say, and not follow anybody blindly. You can learn from people, you can take inspiration from people, but please stop following people blindly and just believing everything somebody says, because honestly, most of the people online don't know that much. I mean, look, I can share with you some of the lessons that I've learned in my life and some of the things that I've seen and some of the, you know, experiences I've had. And I like to share with people the things that I wish I had known, like when I was in my 20s, that I know now as an adult. And I know some people listen, some people don't. But at the end of the day, like, I don't want anybody to follow my advice blindly. And I certainly am not sitting here claiming to know everything. I do think there is validity in seeing people's perspectives and lessons that people have learned in life over the years, and hearing different people give different perspectives. But I also think it's really important to be careful who you follow and who you put your trust in and the type of content that you consume. Never follow anybody blindly, and please don't put people up on pedestals, because the higher you put people up on a pedestal, the further they have to fall. I've done that myself. I've been guilty of it myself. I've put social media influencers up on pedestals, and I will tell you, every single time I've ended up discovering that they were not as great as I thought they were. So I really think that you have to be careful. And honestly, like, I can see it more now that I'm older, but especially people who are younger, I can absolutely see where it would be so easy to get caught up into blindly following some of these social media gurus. Because I mean, when I was a young person, we didn't have social media at all. We certainly didn't have social media gurus, but there were plenty of magazines that had articles that I would obsess over. And I have, again, piles of dating advice books that I've read. I've definitely followed people's dating advice and dating gurus and things, and I've learned some positive lessons. And I've also done things that I'm like, oh, shouldn't have listened to that person. Some things are just life experience. I just really hope that some of the lessons that you have to learn don't end up causing any permanent damage. And I really do believe that the SheraSevens of the world are really a response to the alpha male messages of the world, because I mean, that's what the rules were when the game came out, and we're really just reliving the same thing right now. Women respond to how men show up. I know there's guys who argue that it's the other way around. It's not. Women respond to how men show up. Women respond, they have a wall up or they don't. They either close down or they open, depending on how safe they feel in their environment. If men are not creating a safe environment for women, women are going to shut down and they're going to protect themselves. That's just the way it works. So if you don't like how women are showing up in society, you got to look to the men. And I honestly think that all of us, every person in the world probably could use some like inner work, inner healing, working through traumas. I'm a big believer in that, whether it be therapy, whether it be coaching, whether it just be, I don't know, meditation or you know, movement therapy or something. Everybody in the world needs a lot of healing. And I think especially men, because I know men will say like, well, men are doing the work on themselves and why aren't women? Women are absolutely doing the work. If you actually look at like the self-help industry, the therapy industry, everything, women are absolutely doing the work. Do women have more work to do? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But if men don't start doing the inner work to heal from their issues and their traumas, women are just going to keep getting re-traumatized. Like, men really need to step up as the leaders and the protectors and providers that they're supposed to be in society. It's hard because there's not a lot of healthy masculine role models in our society teaching men to do that. We have several generations that have not had that leadership. But if men don't start stepping up and doing the work, you're just going to have more and more women who are going to be shut down, who are either going to get into a very masculine mindset and, you know, guard and protecting themselves, or they're going to turn to somebody like a SheraSeven who's going to be like, I'm going to play the player before he plays me. You're not going to have women who are going to be that sort of like feminine, open, soft, and receptive energy that men are claiming that they want women to be, if men don't show up in a way that is safe for women to do that. That's just the way, that's the way we're biologically programmed. It's just, that's life. And so I really wish that there were more influencers online, especially more popular influencers online, who were actually giving healing messages to both men and women, that were actually incorporating more of the healing process in dating and getting people like maybe less focused on either dating or hooking up, depending on what the message is, and just working on yourself. I mean, I've said this in my Pick Me Girl video talking about decentering men. I think if women actually just started working on themselves and worried less about like what men wanted and stuff, I think that women would be much better off. I really do believe that for men, like getting their house in order, getting their life in order, and getting, you know, everything straightened out for them, working on their own traumas, but also working on themselves, finding their passion and purpose, is so much more important than them worried about going around and hooking up with women or dating women or whining about how expensive it is to date women. It's like, if you think that it's just too expensive to date women, or you know, it's too much work or too much trouble, work on yourself, work on your own life. If people just learn to kind of work on themselves in their own life, people are going to naturally gravitate towards the people who are right for them. I really do believe that. I know this video wasn't solely about SheraSeven, but to be honest, I really do feel like her popularity is part of a much bigger issue. So I know this wasn't like solely a review on her content, but I just think that her popularity is just evident of a bigger issue. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you have any other video suggestions, because I know this was a very highly requested video topic. If you have any video suggestions or topics or anything you want me to talk about, or any thoughts on dating gurus, any, you know, maybe dating advice books you'd like me to review or something, or anything, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you and I love your suggestions. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you're a woman who would like to learn more about her dark feminine energy, I have the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal. It's an interactive book to help you connect to your dark feminine energy, which is really going to help with your confidence, getting to know yourself, and really learning how to stand in your own sovereignty, which is just going to make you that much more appealing and better suited to find the right partner for you if that is what you're looking for. That's available now on Amazon, and there's a link to that and some of my online courses and masterclasses in the description box below. Be sure you check that out along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.